Hello everybody, welcome back. Sorry it's been a long time since there's been any uploads. Life happens, I got a little busy, but it's good to be back and I'm glad you're back to join me. This is a presentation on rock music, but it's all over the place, but that's the way I like it. But let's get started with a great album that came out in 1992. This is Soul Asylum's sixth album, Grave Dancers Union. And a couple of years ago, this was featured as a Record Store Day release. And to give you an idea, this is a beautiful, this issued 2-record set, and this beautiful translucent red and green vinyl. There you go. Christmas is early thanks to Soul Asylum. But that album there contains the songs I Want Someone to Shove and Runaway Train, which has become a classic. Here we have from 1979, this is Missouri's second album. This is some decent 70s rock music, if you like Kansas, of course. Not as proggy as Kansas, but still pretty good. This next album, Al Kooper, one of the co-founders of Blood, Sweat, and Tears. This is his album, Pretend Like Everything's Normal. I believe that's what the name of it is. Act Like Nothing's Wrong. And there's Al Kooper on the back. And of course, you probably already noticed that the bodies are transposed on that. It's okay. It's not a bad record, but I like his work with Blood, Sweat, and Tears better. This is Gerry Rafferty's first album, solo album. He had formerly been performing with the band called the Humble Bums, and this album is entitled "Can I Have My Money Back, Please?" This is not a bad record. The song Mary Skeffington is on this album. I believe that was covered by Olivia Newton-John, and this came out back in 1971. And later on, him and Joe Egan got together to start the group Stewart's Wheel. And we know a lot about Stewart's Wheel. Coming up is an album by Multigrade. This is 1968, and it's called Wow. And a lot of people have a hard time getting used to this album because it seems to be all over the place. It's proggy, it's psych, it's got some kind of bluesy rock in it. But if you want to start with this record and if you're dubious about whether you like this album or not, listen to a song called He. It's a beautiful, beautiful song. And if you like that one, you might want to graduate to a song called Rose Colored Eyes. But anyway, this is Moby Grape, and this is Wow. A couple of Rush albums coming up. I think this is their second live album. This is Exit Stage Left. I think before that they had All the World's a Stage. And since then they put out some other live recordings, especially on DVD and Blu-ray. This is a real good compilation of their works. And as you can see, they got some of the iconic characters on this album that they do on the other albums. Here's the fellow from Hemispheres, Farewell to Kings. This is Caress of Steel. It's a combination, I think, of moving pictures
and Caress
but Caress of Steel is, I think, that figure. So you're right about the moving pictures part. Very good. And then in the front, we got the young lady from Permanent Waves, which is my brother Adam Bee's favorite album.
Yes.
And this is the other gentleman from the other side of Hemispheres who represents the more logical part. But it's kind of fun looking at these covers and listening to their music. And here's a great album by Rush, an early album. Came out in 1976. This is 2112. And side one deals with the dystopian society in the year 2112. I'd like to stick around to see if that's going to happen, but I'll probably be very old by then. But the second side is just other songs. Very good album if you like early Rush. And if you want to have a good time, if you're in a bad mood and you just want to hear some happy music, no one does it better than the B-52s. This is one of their better early albums. This is Whamming. I first discovered the B-52s when I listened to Bouncing Off the Satellites. So then I had to go back and listen to some of the early stuff, and they're just consistently a fun, good group. Great vocalists and good musicians. Okay, there are some albums in this world that are worth a lot of money. The Beatles' Butcher cover, for example. This one would be worth a lot of money, but I'll tell you why this one's not. This is David Bowie's, came out in 1974. This is Diamond Dogs. Very good album. Most people like the songs Rebel Rebel and Diamond Dogs, but I happen to enjoy the songs Sweet Thing and We Are the Dead. But it's really, really good album. It's got a lot of, this is David Bowie in the height of his glam music career. Now, what makes this album worth a lot of money is what you don't see on the back of this album. If you have a copy of this record and you can see the Dog's Genitalia, that'll get you a small fortune. But this is a really good offering from Bowie. If the song 1984, back in the day, if they had played that song at a disco, nobody would be sitting down. That's what I like about Bowie, is his music appeals to black audiences and white audiences just as well. And it's always been that way in his career. And he surely will be missed by us one and all. Okay, here's a little known group. This is the Moirs, State of Shock. A lot of people haven't heard of these young ladies. This album came out back in 1978. They were born in Scotland, but they were raised in Australia. And they sing like angels. They reach these insanely high notes with such seamlessness that it would just give you chills. They only had a minor hit back in '74, I believe, and I don't recall the name of it. But if you get a chance, you might want to check them out. Like I said, they harmonize and sing just beautiful. This record here, I'm gonna get to that later because I forgot the name of it. Okay, but let's talk about someone I have not forgotten the name of. This is Rod Stewart. I love his 70s stuff. This is album here is Every Picture Tells a Story. I don't need to spend too much time talking about Rod Stewart. Here's a really good album here, Atlantic Crossing. Another enjoyable album by Rod Stewart. I stopped liking him so much when he released that song, If You Want My Body, Do You Think I'm Sexy? I just kind of didn't enjoy that as much as I did his early stuff, and especially the stuff that he did with Small Faces. But still a good singer. Now, one of my favorite groups from Australia is Midnight Oil. And I sing the praises of Diesel and Dust all the time because that is a great album. This one's just as good, not as good, of course. This came out a lot earlier, I think 1984. And it has a more raw sound as opposed to the refined sound they developed with Diesel and Dust. This one here is called Red Sails in the Sunset, and it's a good album. Okay, I have one of my favorite groups is Blind Faith, what you call a supergroup, consisting of Eric Clapton, Steve Winwood, Rich Grech, and Ginger Baker. This is the album with the young lady on the cover that has the continued space on the back. Here's the album with the young lady on the cover and the group on the back. So I want them all. Interesting story about this young lady is her sister was originally the one who was supposed to pose for this record, and she changed her mind. And the young girl said, "Hey, I'll do it." And look what it got her: immortality and a horse. You might want to read the story about that later if you have time. And this is the Blind Faith with the group on the cover and lyrics on the back. Love the lyrics. This album, actually back in the late 60s, made it on what was then known as the Billboard Black Music Chart. That's quite an accomplishment. You have four white gentlemen making a black music chart. But that's not surprising because Eric Clapton is a blues man, and Steve Winwood has one of the most soulful voices in the world. I remember back in 1988, I was driving home and I heard this song on the radio, and I cranked it up and said, "Man, this is some good soul music," and I loved it. And then when I got home, I realized it was Steve Winwood, and the song was called "Roll With It." And I had not heard a song that soulful since Stevie Wonder released Intervisions back in 1974, and so that's probably why the black listeners enjoyed Blind Faith, because when you get those two teamed up, that's what's going to happen. I think I've showed this before. This is another copy of It's a Beautiful Day. And here is one, Propaganda. I think it took me forever to find this record. When I was younger, this was the holy grail of my record-seeking days because there was some sort of a copyright dispute, and this album was very hard to find. But you can pretty much find him anywhere. It's available on CD. Whitebird is a great song. It's a good song to kick off this album. I believe it came out in 1967. Okay, we'll speed along here. This is John Lennon's Mind Games. Don't need to say too much about that or him. I just recently got this one. I'm so happy. This is the 1986 live Stevie Nicks, and it's great. I love it. But I want your opinion on something. Do you think this picture would have made a better cover than this picture? I think this picture would have made a better cover, but that's just being equivalent. But I just love the record. What do you think?
Back in the 80s, everybody probably liked the front cover.
Yeah, that's true. That's true. Okay, thank you. Made a good point about that. But regardless of what the cover could be blank, and I'd still love
The back
Stevie
is
Nick's.
better looking.
Yeah. I'm going to say a few words about Steely Dan's second album, Countdown to Ecstasy. Steely Dan has no qualms about singing about the drug culture here in America. This album is no exception. There's a song in here called The Boston Rag, which is about someone having a drug overdose. The song called My Old School is about a college campus being raided in a drug bust. The song Razor Boy has many interpretations, but some people conclude that there's a line in the song saying, "What are you going to do when the razor boy comes and takes your fancy things from you?" Something like that. Razor, cocaine. So it could be a song talking about how drug addiction can take your fancy things from you, including your life. Others say that the razor boy is the Grim Reaper. But regardless of all the my philosophical feelings on this album, this is a solid, good album. Really, really rocked up album. It starts with the song Bodhisattva. I think most of you are familiar with that song. Insanely good guitar work with Skunk Baxter, I believe. But that's Steely Dan's second album, Countdown to Ecstasy. Here's somebody I newly discovered, Chad Van Galen. I enjoy this guy's music very much, but I don't know much about him, but I will be buying more of his vinyl. And here's The Jam, live. Everybody remembers that song, That's Entertainment. And the Rolling Stones, more hot rocks. Don't need to say much about the Stones, except they're one of the greatest bands ever, of course. This is a greatest hits compilation. Here's a band, as we talked about with Bowie before, that black audiences and white audiences alike love this group. I think they refer to themselves as robot rock. They released the albums Autobahn and Trans Europe Express. Now, back when Trans Europe Express came out in the early 80s, me and my family were spending some time in New York in a neighborhood that was 99% black. But there wasn't a car that drove by when you could not hear that song, Trans Europe Express, coming out the windows. Kraftwerk has inspired all types of music: glam, goth, hip-hop, electronica, and they have a lot to be proud of in their career. Like I said, Trans Europe Express is probably their best album, but this one's not bad. In fact, I believe this song is featured in the film Breakin'. That's Tour de France. Okay. Last album I'm going to show you is the cover that is not made anymore by the group Lynyrd Skynyrd. There's a reason why you don't see this cover no more. Ronnie Van Zant, Steve Gaines, and his sister Cassie, who were band members, died in a plane crash shortly after this album was released. The recording company thought it would be more tasteful if they took away the flames. And in this particular picture, he looks like he's dead because his eyes are closed. So they replaced that with a black cover and a slightly different picture. Another interesting thing about Lynyrd Skynyrd is there was this little feud going on between Neil Young and Lynyrd Skynyrd. In the song Southern Man, Neil Young bemoans the racism by the Southern man in the South. And Lynyrd Skynyrd answered back with Sweet Home Alabama, stating that the Southern man doesn't need Neil Young around. But it was more of a friendly feud than vicious. The proof of that is, you can't see it here, but Ronnie Van Zant is wearing a Neil Young t-shirt. So I think there was a lot of love between those guys, and it's tragic about the death of these band members. But Lynyrd Skynyrd has continued putting out good music, and like I said, this is the original cover, and I don't find it distasteful, but I can understand why some would. Okay, that's it. I kind of went all over the place. I hope I didn't go too fast. If there's something you want me to talk more about, I will be glad to do that on our next upload. Thank you very much, and have a good day.